So I have a little bit to say about psychic grooming or psychic handling. And it deals with psychic warfare, okay? So in 2015, there was somebody in my graduate school class who also lived in the same building on the same floor. It was housing that graduate school made available to students, and they had more than one graduate school together. So it wasn't just the acupuncture school; it was other schools. Anyway, she lived with me, and she was in my program, and in the kitchen of that place, she started making some claims. One, that she was basically Kuan Yin incarnate, right? She was Guan Yin. So she had heard the first day of class that I was a Taoist. I had said that to the people, that I was a Taoist, and that I was interested in the medicine because of my path on the Tao. So one of two things is possible. One, that she was maliciously taking advantage of the fact that I had mentioned my interest in Taoism, and perhaps gullibility to some degree, that she was able to mold me. Okay. The other possibility is that she actually is that, and that I'm connected in some way to her. Anyway, she started saying things like we're actually married or things, and told me some future events that would happen. With accuracy, they happened, and some other people that lived on the floor and that were in the program talked to me and said a few remarks that planted seeds for mental illness, right? So she said, finally, I'm going to send you on a long trip, a long road trip into like Seattle and things. And I was like, okay, what if I just don't do it? Okay, what if I just don't do it? And she basically said, good luck. Well, I ended up doing the road trip. It wasn't as if I made an effort to like avoid that, because who wouldn't want a road trip when they're in a position to do a road trip? So I drove through Nevada and California, Nevada, and Utah, and came back up through Idaho to Washington. And at that point, some of her planted seeds of sabotage started working. So I actually stopped in a Ross, right? Ross Dress for Less, you know that one, discounts clothing store. Stopped in a Ross in, I think it was Wenatchee, Washington, or something like that, and purchased wedding clothes. Purchased outright tuxedo, outright whatever. So whatever. I arrived to Seattle, and by the time I arrived to Seattle, I had changed into the tuxedo on the road. Threw away my clothes in a rest stop bathroom, and was wearing a tuxedo now. So that I arrived to Seattle late in the day, and I was looking for some accommodations, right? So basically, I started out at the hostel, but the hostel here, you have to pre-reserve because of all the, sort of transient people. They don't keep their doors open, number one. So in some cases, like, you can just go up to the hostel and get a bed. It's not like that in Seattle. There's too many transients to do business that way. So I was there, mind you, in a tuxedo, driving a Jetta that runs on diesel, and when it was in California, it was biodiesel. So, in other words, I quit my job as a bus driver in California at Bowers Transportation, which is a relatively good bus company. One of the reasons I quit my job is because I just didn't like the whole thing with the classism and the fact that Bowers Transportation was one of the providers of those Google buses and those tech buses that allow people to live in the valley and sort of actually, so they mostly live in the valley and they work in San Francisco, or sometimes they work in the valley and they live in San Francisco. Anyway, they totally mess up the transportation of San Francisco, in my opinion. And like, I wasn't wanting to work for a bus company that did that. Now, mind you, I never was assigned to that account. I never had that sort of service account. I wasn't in a tech account. I never had that. It would have been lucrative if I had accepted that. But anyway, I didn't. Based on principle, I was never assigned that, and I never got that. And I wasn't making enough money to pay the rent in San Francisco. And there was the added thing that the school didn't really want me to stay in the housing if I wasn't going to school. Why wasn't I going to school? Well, sort of the things dealing with this girl, and there was another girl that I dated who was in earlier class, so she was a little older, also living there, and I don't know, I just didn't want to deal with that sort of thing. The other thing is that it was quite expensive, and without working full-time, really almost full-time, I wasn't able to support myself through school. Student loans at the graduate level only cover so much. So academically, because of my financial struggles, I was struggling a bit. A&P, my grades were terrible. The A&P instructor took me aside and said, I don't know what's going on, but your grades are really slipping, and I don't know, you'd be lucky to pass this class. So I think I did pass, but just barely, right? And that's saying a lot in acupuncture school because they don't like to issue grades below like an A or B usually. So basically, that's where I was with that. So I arrived to Seattle 2015 and started seeing things like people had predicted, right, in grad school, that I actually saw starships like Enterprise come down and tether to the Space Needle and this sort of thing, right? So it wasn't exactly mental illness, it was psychic illness, right? It was staged and it was groomed, it was set up. But for me, as the victim of that, like I missed 5 years where I was labeled mentally ill, where I thought I was disabled, partially took disability to support myself. Disability is not going to 100% cover your costs at that stage if you only have so much working experience before you end up disabled. And probably owe an overage to the Social Security Administration anyway. So basically I can say that the hospitals and institutions, by medicating me, took my life away, because my last attempt to go to acupuncture school in 2019 failed, and I was dismissed from the program because of my academic performance. So I was doing okay body work in San Francisco, and then on my next round studying in Seattle, medicated, right, messed up, recently hospitalized just before I got back into the program, right? I wasn't doing well. My muscle memory wasn't helping me learn the protocols as much as I may have watched the video. I was living with roommates, you know. Living with roommates, it's almost impossible to do this kind of thing if they're not going to help you study, if they're not going to leave you alone, if they have their own thing going on, and especially if they have dogs. So I had a roommate with a dog, right? German Shepherd. So ultimately, you know, it looks like my life is set up by somebody, groomed by somebody. No, I don't have a case in court. I can't go to the court and say that these people groomed me for psychosis because the statute of limitations applies. The grooming happened in California. The statute of limitation for slander and liability in California is 1 year. So that would pertain to slander and liability, if any, the other word. So anyway, um, yeah, that would be the pertinent charge if it was a civil matter. Now, if it were a medical matter, the law in Washington, where I was first treated, would probably pertain only to a maximum 3 years, right? It doesn't, I don't think, even cover that. So medical liability or medical malpractice would pertain to anything that happened in 2019 during my hospitalization. I can't really accuse anyone for malpractice during that time. My case would be in 2015, if anything, with those who determined I was mentally ill in 2015 instead of precedent for treatment, that I was to be regarded thusly. And so I missed, let's say, maximum, really altogether with 6 hospitalizations, I missed 3 months of work, which is, at my current rate, only $6,000. So it wouldn't be a case even if it were a case, right? But I'm just giving you a heads up, sort of what the situation is with psychic warfare and grooming and being handled, having handlers, people who you don't necessarily want to deal with or don't trust, who are programming you and sending you a certain way, right? So that I was watching a lot of Nowhere Man before this happened. During that time in San Francisco, when I wasn't studying, I was on my iMac, my old Mac, watching Nowhere Man. And that was sort of where I was headed, right? That was sort of, I guess it was a heads up, like, this is gonna, so I got into Nowhere Man on my own, I used to watch the show, got into it at that time, right? Totally tells me a heads up, this is you, this is Nowhere Man, right? So yeah, to be the living Nowhere Man, you could look at my resume and you could say that might be true. However, the resume is what it is. So I spent a year in security to sort of tape my resume back together in physical security as a security guard, mainly taking temperatures for people. This is the sort of thing I'm going to be relegated to unless I figure a way out. But what I'm saying, this is what we're up against. This is the kind of people that will come to you and build your trust and sort of say things that are off color and get your guard down, and you're sort of like, you have your defenses and you're very logical and you say, none of this shit is true, and even if it is, I'm not going to let it trip me up. I'm not going to get into your whole game. And I did. I got into the game completely, 100% brainwashed, fell for everything, every little trick, and believed that this woman would like magically marry me and bring me money, and all kinds of crazy shit would happen. So all of the claims with regard to when I saw the spaceship and everything, I fell for. In doing so, that constituted mental illness, right? On the books, it constitutes mental illness. So that's sort of what the opposition is up to, can send us to. If I wasn't disturbed by these people, maybe I would be a licensed acupuncturist somewhere. Maybe I'd be working in California or somewhere, maybe with a doctorate. It costs extra to get a doctorate, but if you just have a master's degree, you can do that too. I'm not saying my life would be dramatically different, but I think it probably would be if I was left on my own. Anyway, I'm not, and I'm a wage worker, right? So I accept that because I'm a Taoist. I say, that's fine. I'm a wage worker. I'll take it. It's just part of my identity, right? So I think we're looking at the transition out of that, number one. Number two, I'm also a graduate student still. Didn't let that trip me up, and I'm studying marriage and family therapy online. And if you study online, you can still get the same certification as you would anywhere else. So I'm looking at, therapy, psychotherapy now being applicable. And having done all this stuff with hospitalization and abnormal psychology, now I can meet people halfway where they are in life and sort of give them the benefit of the doubt. And we don't get too much into diagnosis in marriage and family therapy, but we still have something called identified patients, so that anybody with a diagnosis within the family system is considered an identified patient, right? And if you have an identified patient in the therapy, they sort of get special needs accommodations, or special accommodations, I guess, in some case, because if their disorder is causing imbalance in the family system will want to address that. So I was the deranged, crazy person. I was the person in recovery, still am. I was the person that's a disabled person in the family. I was the sick person. So I was the identified patient, right? And, there was a lot of pressure on me, feeling like, I was messing up the dynamics of my family and things. Moving back in with my father, right? My father now had to purchase real estate, in terms of, we had never had a family home, but now he purchased his childhood family home from our cousins after the demise of my last surviving grandparent. So in other words, basically lives there now. So in other words, at the same time, I was coming back to my sister's life, where she had a newborn infant that year in 2015. So my little nephew. And you can say that was trying times for all of us. But having done so, having gone through that, now I'm prepared to deal with many situations that families will face, including divorce and things leading up to divorce. So we can sort of see, even if this person or these people that groomed me are sort of opponents to me, maybe they're not. Maybe what she says is maybe true. Maybe we're married and things. I don't think that particular person is my spouse because of the dirt I have on her. But regardless, I'm saying the situation, it didn't really mess me up. But coming into it, you probably don't want to get into these things. And if you see someone targeting you like that, maybe notify the police. And I don't know what they're going to do in terms of this, but maybe society will start to see these patterns and sort of, if you say, I think someone's grooming me in some way, or someone's handling me in some way, don't say grooming. Grooming really applies to sexual abuse, right? I'm saying the term should be used for this other thing too, which it doesn't currently apply to, but the handling is the proper word, handling. So yeah, you can say, I have someone in my life that I think is a handler. I don't know what side they stand for. I don't want them bothering me. So file a police report, restraining order. If she lives in the same building, right, and you file a restraining order, you're out of luck, right? So that's why, even if I had thought of these things, right, at the time, right, I didn't get into it. I was living there, But if I had moved to Oakland and gotten a room or something, I could have made it a police matter. But if I did, what would the police do of San Francisco, right? I was living in Oakland, working in San Francisco, and had lived in San Francisco, talked to the San Francisco police. Honestly, what will they do about something like that, which is a civil matter and a therapy matter, and nothing of their concern, so that they'll take a report, and that will be it. So that's what we're looking at, right? But for you, if you're in this situation, go to the police. I don't know what they will actually do. Maybe they're trained to deal with some of this stuff. Nowadays, it's hard to trust the police because many of them have shown their true colors, and their true color is often red. So with their true color being red, can we trust them? I don't know. But if you live in a community where you feel you can trust the police, do. And the FBI is also there if you need them, if in the United States. So these supports exist, and there are therapists. And now you can see if I'm going to be a therapist, therapists probably are pretty understanding about these matters. So, with regard to manifest, we saw a malicious therapist. That's not normally the case, but if you encounter a malicious therapist, you would sort of know because they're sort of planted in your life, and it's like the one therapist you can see. Whereas if you choose your therapist yourself based on qualifications and information, then you can trust them ultimately. We have a high ethical standard in the practice, and for you to encounter like a sort of government agent, sort of high ranking echelon military person as your therapist, like in Manifest, another show, is unlikely. So you can see that TV is a huge influence to me. Movies are a huge influence to me. Unfortunately, that looks a little bit like mental illness when it comes into life. But anyway, for what it's worth, that's my spiel on that. Whatever it's worth.